Hello, we are the Dirty Birds, and I'm Evelyn, and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Antonia. I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Ian. I use he, him pronouns.
And I'm Rachel, and I use she, her pronouns. Today, we have each found a comic, and we're going to talk about how said comic relates to McCloud's book, and specifically his concept of icon and closure, and then Freud's theory of the fetish as well.
So I am first up. I'm going to go in here. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Oh my God, not my tabs. So this is my comic. It's called Ghostwriter. It's the third one, published in 1951 by Magazine Enterprises in the English language, as you can see right here. So this is the panel that I chose. So we're going to go ahead and read it, and then I'm going to talk about it a little, and then just like explanatorily, if that's a word, and then put it in terms of what we're discussing today. So the ghostwriter. Down before he could give the alarm, he should be out long enough for me to have a look around. Ugh. We will not raid the Warren Ranch tonight. I'm giving orders around here, and I say we're rustling that herd. Warren left town 3 days ago for a week. Only his wife and an old hired hand are there. But he who rides the midnight winds may be there again. If he is, shoot him down. He ain't no ghost, but if he shows up again, I'll make a ghost out of him. We have seen him cut in two. It is not human. Okay, I've got another plan. Ghosts don't ride by daylight. Saddle up. We're heading for the Warren Ranch right now. Faster, faster. I've got to stop them somehow. Soon after, Sing Song Bar and his killers are going to raid the Warren Ranch right now. There are too many for me to handle alone, and there's no time to organize a posse. My only hope was scaring off the Indians as the ghostwriter, but it's daylight now. And then, not all bad as seems. Please looky in Sing Song's almanac. Sing Song, you're right. The ghostwriter can beat them now, and this time I'll bring Jed Bar in for keeps. We ride. Very good. Sing Song's certain Indians not read almanac. They get big surprise. Okay, so that's my little panel. Clearly very racist. There's a lot of problematic things about this. But putting that aside, you kind of, in the context of just this panel, you're able to piece together like what's happening. This someone is a ghost writer. The ghost writer actually looks pretty cool. He like wears all white. But anyway, you're able to piece together what's going on in this narrative, not completely, but you get like a sense of the characters and representations of good and bad. I'd like to note that the representation of Native Americans as the villains is very bad. And then the token person of color, if that's even good representation, is kind of the comedic relief, but that is besides the point. So in terms of closure, we talked about how closure is the gutter, these white spaces right here. It's the space between the panels. That's where closure occurs. So active closure, when you close this, that's when you close the space. So the point is we imagine something more horrible than can be drawn, and we kind of fill in the blanks of what is not shown to be happening. So in the context of this, there are certain things that we do not know about. So for example, this guy gets punched, but then over here we're like, what happened? What happened after the guy gets punched? Another example is we see these two people talking, but we're not seeing the facial expressions of this man, this character, as they're talking. So there's kind of an element of plot lost in that. But we see his face in this panel. So the presence of his face here and the absence of it here, it leads us to believe that right here in this space, the gutter, that's where we kind of fill in the blanks, and we assume that he's piecing together a plan in his head, even though we're not actively seeing that. When it comes to icon, I would say that on the scale that we looked at in class, this is the somewhere in the middle of the scale. A lot of the characters, it actually depends on the character. Like this guy right here, he's a little more realistic than iconic. That's probably because they want to give him more of a facing that he's one of the main characters. But this character right here, there's a lot less lines used to define his features. So one, it's a little bit racist. It's a lot of bit racist. But two, it's also because he's not deemed important enough a character to be given this like realistic image. Whereas with this guy, he's kind of like one of the titular characters. So he's given more of a realistic face and less of an iconic one, so that in a way he's more remembered. How this relates to fetishism. So upon looking at this, like I just thought about the initial reaction of someone like opening this comic book and being like, oh yeah, like this is it. Like this is what's for me. This, I love this shit. Oh, I love this stuff. Like excited to read it and everything. This is not like the reaction that you have with a movie. It is the reaction you have with the movie, but we kind of talked about how unlike movies, comics are still, they're discrete. They're quite literally boxed off into different panels. And but at the same time, they do bear a connection to the way movies are set up. So there's clearly like a storyline for us to follow. The difference is that we're allowed to linger. We can pause on this image like we can't on a movie. Of course, if you're like watching at home, you can pause the screen, but that's not the common experience while watching a movie. With comics, they're kind of structured for the very purpose of you being able to linger on every image, on every box, as if it's something to be beheld. So with that being said, it makes comics more prone to fixation. So this moment right here, for example, this would happen very quickly in a movie. You kind of absorb the shock factor of this guy getting punched and then you move on. Whereas in a comic, you are able to linger, and there's kind of a fetishistic quality to that, because rather than moving forward with the plot narrative, you're kind of, the comic allows you, but you also allow yourself to linger on the images that are being presented to you, and kind of analyze them, similar to the analysis that I would say happens when the child first realizes that his mother does not have a penis and that there's something missing. So in a way, I kind of relate the lingering, the fetishistic quality of lingering on every image to the first time that a child realizes that his mother doesn't have a penis and then replaces it with another object, which becomes the fetish object. So you're trying to find something that in this image to one kind of relate to in terms of like iconography. You can maybe see yourself in some of the characters because they're drawn in a very stylistic way, but also trying to pick out what's missing in a way, I would say. You're lingering on every image, trying to kind of understand it and derive as much pleasure as you want from it before finally moving on to the next one, and then on to the next one, and kind of doing the same thing. And I think the overarching quality of comics, as like I was reading through this, is that like, well, one, the effect of them is kind of lost in the fact that like I'm looking at this on a like computer screen. But like for people who collect comics, I would say that there is a fetishistic quality even to the fact that they have them like physically and tangibly, and like just the fact that a lot of the time they're like stored under beds. Like they kind of feel like secretive, and just the indulgence of them also feels secretive. And just the image that's conjured up of someone like lingering on these images is very fetishistic. And yeah, that is what I have to say. I don't know if anyone has any comments.
Great job. And also, just to kind of go off what you were saying about the things that are missing, like in the frames, like you were talking about, and how that has kind of like a fetishistic element to it. I feel like things being like missing from the certain frames of the comics is like such a important aspect of like what the comics are, because in order to understand like what is happening, you need to address like what's missing. Like in the one that you were showing us, there was the frame of the guy getting punched, and then it was like a completely different angle. So like in order to understand like what you're looking at and whose perspective you're seeing everything from, you have to like acknowledge like what's missing from that panel that was in the other one, if that makes sense. also I feel like so like trying to figure out how to word this. Like when it comes to like iconography, is that how you say that? I don't know if that's like the word that you should use for that, but like iconic drawings, I guess. So many of these comics portrayed like certain groups of people, well, like Native people or like just any people of color essentially in these comics in like these really racist, like weird caricature ways. And I feel like so much of that is kind of, well, because of racism, obviously, but also because of like the fact that like iconic like drawings, I feel like are like very simplistic. So many artists back then were kind of like just taking the stereotypes that they were drawing from these people and just drawing those like stereotypes into like their facial features, like completely ignoring like, if that makes sense, like any other aspects of like what makes a human face. They're like, oh well, this group of people has like this specific facial feature, so that's just going to be extremely emphasized like, in this drawing, and everything else will be disregarded. But it is really interesting how like the white characters in that comic that you were just showing us have like a lot more like detail drawn onto their faces versus the characters who like the native character, the Asian character who was like supposed to be like not as like not to the same level. So yeah, I just think that not interesting. That was fascinating and opened my eyes to something that I didn't know. So yeah.
Just one thing that you said about absence just made me think of like, it's like a little bit of a statement, just that like in terms of comics and fetishism, I think this statement goes for both things, that you derive meaning from the absence of things. So whatever's not there, you try to make sense of it and then turn it into something that can give you pleasure. Yeah, that's all. Who's next?
I'm next. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. So I just took two little screenshots to use because I was in class on Monday when we were looking at the McCloud book. I was thinking a lot about when we were talking about voyeurism before, and in relation to the fetish, how sort of looking in on something is a way of like being close to it, having that aspect of desire while also maintaining that sort of lack, and how there wouldn't be sort of this want for the voyeur to be able to see everything or be a part of something. It's more just like the little pieces of it that they get. And specifically with this frame here, how the couple goes like out of the frame and then you are left with like that gutter. It's like boom, 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 and then nothing, and you are left imagining. So I wanted to find something that sort of went along with that. And so this is from Barbie and Ken. It's, I think, the 4th issue of this specific comic, but I wasn't going to read it, but now I feel like I kind of want to because Ian did such a fabulous narration. So I'm only going to present the bottom part of it. So it's kind of out of context, but and now for a couple of hair hints. If any of you are bothered by stubborn curls, and then we've got a cut, then a couple of poofs of hairspray and you're all set. Switching from head to foot, these elegant shoes by Strolla Style are the latest thing. So I was kind of curious about how and why she's sort of cut off in each of these. And I thought that was interesting in the context, especially of the fetish, and how she's got these objects as well in each. We're looking at like this mirror, but she's still like maintaining eye contact. In the second one, it's just like half of her face and it's cut off. And in the third one, obviously feet, shoes, whatever. But I felt like the objects that she had and the way that it's framed has an aspect of icon and an aspect of closure at the same time, sort of, because you're seeing these things that are represented in a fairly cartoonish way, but that are symbols with strong meaning. And at the same time, you're forced to sort of isolate them as you go through. And so I think that when we're sort of looking in on it, you've got that kind of voyeuristic aspect of things where you see a part of something, you see a part of her and her getting ready and like her sort of approaching the day and everything, but you're getting different parts of it, and you yourself as the viewer are putting it together as a whole in whatever way you choose. So the fetishist might then sort of want to keep it as just these frames where you're like getting to see like her feet or her legs, and then you're kind of just leaving it there, or the viewer might put it all together as like one person, or you might just read it, not think twice about it. But it was I felt like related to objects just by the way you're sort of seeing it cut up like that. But yeah.
Yeah. This kind of reminded me of when we talked about the male gaze and we watched that clip of Marilyn Monroe and the creepy old guy in class.
Yeah.
Even just like the formatting of this in relation to fetishism and also the male gaze, her body is like never seen as whole. And that's kind of something that we talked about in relation to the Marilyn Monroe clip, how it only ever shows like the top half of her body, or like that it cuts out her face, but it shows like her torso and her like crotch area. And like just like she's fragmented into these different parts, she's never seen as completely whole. And that's kind of what's happening here. You don't see the legs in the, you don't see like the bottom half of the legs in the first one. There's a close-up of her face in the second panel, and then the third panel is like exclusively her legs. The difference though is that like in relation to like what I kind of said is that you're, oh, I was going to say the word allow. I'll say allow. You're allowed to like linger on these images. They're like still things. They're paused, fragmented in time, fragmented similarly to the way that her body is fragmented. So like the comic in that way is using its own format to kind of play into the pre-existing notions of like the male gaze and fetish that already exist. For
sure. Yeah, when you were talking about your comic, I did kind of get stuck on that like lingering and fixation, and thinking about it in relation to this. I thought that was a good way to look at it, how you're really just picking out what you want to look at and can stay as long as you want.
Yeah, I also was just thinking, like, going off of all of that, because I was thinking the same thing about how you can like relish in this more so than like you could possibly like in a movie. Because like you were like Ian was saying before, like you do have the, I guess, currently the ability to like go back and like rewatch things, but that's like not the true, I feel like, film experience. But I feel like this almost like speaks more like it's more like true fetishism in a sense, because like we've obviously talked about how with fetishism, like the whole point is essentially like you get close to satisfaction but you don't reach it. And so I feel like this is almost more so like that kind of thing, because it's like the still image versus like the movement of the image, and also like the fact that it like you can sit here and like keep looking at it and like continuously like get from it, if that makes sense, but like it's just coming short of it in a more exaggerated way than in it would be in a film, if that makes sense. So yeah, just going off of all that.
Yeah. Cool.
Very cool.
Okay, I think I am next, correct? So I will screen share. Okay, can you see? Okay, cool. So this is mine, and the comic is Amazing Adventures, the first one from 1950, published by Ziff Davis in the English language. So I guess like I kind of was focusing on all of the panels, but specifically this one with the woman's giant face, and then this second one, and then the other one with the woman in it. So like kind of like bits and pieces of the screen. So I'll read through it because like why not, right? Like might as well. Okay, so what have I done? I'll let them know I've come to my senses. I'll surrender. No, beloved, do not surrender. It's her, that asteroid witch. Sorry, I can't read it. Okay, the asteroid witch, and she's even more wonderful than I had dreamed. I've got to go to her. Nothing will stop me. And then Darrow battles like a being inspired, narrowly eluding a maze of crisis crossing explosive beams and hurling space torpedoes. He miraculously evades oblivion. He's broken through into area PIE 11X and 921YO. Shall we follow? No need to. The fool is doomed. Joyously, Vince pursues the unearthly being through the void. Too late! Vince discovers that his space liner has been damaged in battle. He grapples with the controls and crashes. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, so like I said, first I'm going to focus on this and like I'll talk a little bit about everything. So first thing I want to go over, me grabbing my book. First thing I want to go over is Icon. And so something that I thought was interesting about this particular comic with iconic drawing is that obviously like her face in particular, which is kind of what I'm focusing on, like it's kind of like I feel like middle ground, maybe a little bit more towards Icon, kind of, just because it's like she doesn't have like tons of like facial details except for eyes and mouth and like kind of her nose. But I think that the reasoning behind, I mean, obviously that's like the style of the comic, but I think what this level of Icon kind of does for the comic is like it allows the woman's face to look iconic enough, and like not look extremely realistic, but realistic enough where like she can seem provocative. Because I mean, like her eyelids in this, like, you know, like it's purposely definitely made for her to be kind of like sexy. So I thought that was interesting, and which I'll go back into in a second. And so then regarding closure, I think that in this comic in particular, because over here like you're hearing about like what's going on, and then all of a sudden there's like explosions and bang and boom and whatever. And so I think that what the closure does is allow kind of like violence in a way. So I think that a huge part of this comic's closure is like for you to envision the violence that's going on without it actually having to be like drawn out for you right there on the comic. So I think that that's like an interesting way that this particular comic utilizes closure. So yeah, so also a little bit again about Icon, I also think that going back to like her provocative look and everything, I think also kind of has to do with, I know that in class we compared like iconography to like something that looks very iconic is almost kind of like simple in the same way that like a baby's face is simple. And so obviously like you wouldn't look at like, what's an iconic, Greg Heffley from Diary of a Wimpy Kid. You wouldn't look at him and be like, damn, he's sexy. Cause like you wouldn't. But like this, like this woman in particular is like just the right level of icon where like you can still be like, oh, she's sexy without it being like creepy and weird. Like that looks like a baby kind of thing. So yeah, so going into fetish, this is kind of something, this is like more of a general statement than it is like directly. I mean, you could kind of be like, oh, fetish, like this hot lady that they're drawing. Also like her little fit down here, just saying. But I have a more generalized statement to make about fetish, which is just that one thing that we talked about in class, but like very briefly, was like the concept of like fetish being private and kind of like antisocial. Like somebody who is like a fetishist, like it's not something that one, they like will advertise to the world, and it's also something that is like in a way, like in and of itself, just like a private matter and like is only conducted in private, only thought of in private, like that kind of thing. I would hope so in private for the most part. But I was gonna ask you guys and also just say that I think that comics in a lot of ways are very similar to that, like just the private and antisocial like aspect of it. Because I think most of the time people who are reading comics are doing so on their own. Like I don't think it's like super, or it's not like the common comic book experience to like be reading a comic with a pal. Like that would be fun and cute and awesome, but like I feel like for the most part people just like read them on their own. Whereas I think that film is a lot of the time enjoyed with a few besties, you know, like you're all watching it together. And so I think that the fetishistic elements of comics then like are really emphasized by the privacy of them and kind of like the antisocial aspects of them. And yeah, that's kind of, and also obviously like the whole still image thing, like, you know, we're seeing her whole body here and just her face here. So kind of a little bit of like what we just talked about. But yeah, if you guys have any thoughts about the privacy thing or anything, let them be known. And I'm going to stop sharing right now. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to oh, Sorry, and just one thing. I thought about the privacy thing that you just talked about. That's really interesting because, like, even just thinking about it, like, just we have like movie theaters. Like, that's like even if you're not going with your friends, you're like still watching it with strangers. You know what I mean? So I think you can go to the movie theater alone, but you're not alone. You're with people. So I think that's a very interesting concept, and yeah, or not interesting, but fascinating,
That's
cool.
exactly what I was. Yeah, that's what I was gonna bring up to a T. We have movie theaters. You go with your friends. It's fun. Nobody looks at you sideways for going to see a movie with a friend. But then you have Comic-Con, and then like anyone who goes to that is kind of labeled as like a sexually frustrated nerd. And like that just plays into like this narrative of fetishism and like the difference between comics and movies. They fulfill a lot of the same purposes like narrative wise, but the form is different. And then the social stigmas that surround that are kind of evident of blah blah.
I had a quote written down from Freud that said, let's see, the fetish object, oh, it's not withheld, so it's easily accessible, which I feel like relates to that, where the fetish and the comic are both things that, unlike having like to have a chase kind of situation going on, like you're fully in control and whatever you're like desiring is right there accessible. Like you can like make it your own wherever you are, like in private kind of thing. Whereas like, yeah, like you were saying with the movies, it's different. Like it's, yeah.
All right, should I go?
Yes, I was just gonna say, Antonia, take it away.
Okay. I wanted to show more of the comic, but my thing isn't working, so good thing I took a screenshot. Okay. My comic was called Rula, and these are the panels that I chose, and I'll just do what everyone else did and read it. Okay. Oh, he scratches her. No. Oh, sorry. The thing is like covering up, so I can't read the top part. No, we must stop him. We all die. If we could overpower him, rush upon him quickly. What is this evil? Stand back. All of you will feel my scratches. Thus the werewolf has created a band of creatures like unto himself. So with the idea of closure, I found it really interesting that like artist chose, or the author chose to kind of, the gutter is kind of like, I don't know, in a different way than what we've been looking at. It's more of like has a movement, which I thought was cool. And you know, you can make the jump that from panel 2 to panel 3, the ladies are like, you see one woman saying to like rush upon him quickly, but the reader can make the jump that they actually physically do the movement with the gutter. And then also from panel 3 to 4, you can see that, or not see, but you see that the werewolf is scratching the women, and then you can make the jump from panel 3 to 4 that they turn into werewolves, because then their appearances are changed. And with the idea of icon, I would say these are the people's features are like middle to like, well, obviously the werewolf is like the most realistic, or not more, but more stylized, and just has more like lines and details on his face, making him look more like rugged and older and more realistic, I guess, even though he's a werewolf. And then the women, I think, in my opinion, are a little less detailed, which kind of the idea of cuteness that we were talking about in class, because the woman has like an upturned nose and like just small, cute, like her lips are very like pursed and cute, and Yeah, and then with the whole idea of fetish, I found it, I'm gonna make this jump, but I don't know if this can be really, I don't know. But like the idea, the fetish of like having all the, like being a man and having all these women around and turning them into like, you know, having that kind of played into my mind when I was reading this. And also with the, I was going back when I was looking it over when we were talking about still image, even though like in panel 3, technically their bodies are showing, if you look, like not one of them is full body showing, like there's parts that are covered, like not, you can't see one woman fully from head to toe, which kind of you know, it goes along with the idea that we were talking about of the still image and like, you know, not see, like the less you see. And yeah, so yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen, sorry.
I'll say that like even if it's not like extremely violent, just the idea itself is very violent to me. Like the way that his like arms were wrapped around one of their necks was very violent. And just like in the third panel, he's like pushing the face of one of them up and then like grabbing kind of the back of another one. It's very violent in its subject matter. I feel like there's more to say about that. But
Yeah,
another thing, just from panel 3 to 4, we don't actually see the like transformation of the women into werewolves. There's a fetishistic quality to that, I would say, where like it's left to your own imagination to kind of have your way with the information that you're given. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like going off of what you were saying about the violence of it, I feel like there's kind of like a sexualization of violence in a sense because like one thing I noticed is how the like facial features and the expressions of the women like change after they were changed into werewolves, and they kind of seem like they're supposed to be a little bit more like provocative or like sexy kind of like after their shift to werewolves. And I feel like the positioning of the characters as well, like the way he was grabbing them and the way like their backs were like bent back and like, but like also like so much of their skin is like exposed, like it just feels kind of like a weird sexualization of like that type of violence. And like almost, and it is kind of like reflective in a way also of like kind of like domestic violence and stuff, like the grabbing of their throats and like scratching them and hitting them. So I don't know, that's kind of a thought I was thinking off of what Ian said.
it's like the early, like, you know, I feel like this was an early on like sexually, like not the idea that like women like to be have pain and feel like pain is pleasure almost, you know, like the, like if you porn, like it's all like whipping and choking and like whatever. This is like an early on like version of that almost, if you think about it. I don't know.
And
I
also
definitely
just
agree.
going back to like
No, you can go, Ian, you're good.
just like going back to the lingering, like the fetishistic nature of comics like allows you to just fixate on these images of violence and kind of like internalize them as like things that are sexual even though they're just violent in reality.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, like, I definitely agree, Antonio, with what you were saying, especially about the porn thing. Because I was gonna actually bring up porn earlier. Sounds strange, but I feel like it kind of relates to obviously like what we're talking about. Like, I think that porn is like talking about like heterosexual porn, like straight porn with like a man and a woman. Like 99% of the time, it is like the sexualization of pain and like violence, and like women are into violence, and like in turn makes men think that women are into violence, if that makes sense. Like porn is just bad. But I definitely think that this is very reflective of that. And like in a sense, like you're saying, I mean, because like porn can be like images, but like more often than not in like our current day, it's video. So I feel like this is kind of reflective and almost like uh what's the word I'm looking for? Like foreshadowing. That sounds like annoying, but like almost like that concept, even though it's like been
Yeah.
around for as long as like this comic has been around. But I just thought that was an interesting point, and I definitely agree. Or not interesting, a beautifully said and definitely correct point.
Yeah, one last thing that I just want to say is that like just that discussion reminds me of like just the concept of lesser satisfaction. And like to me, it kind of gets like problematic when you start thinking about that, because like we talked a lot about how like the fetishist has kind of a way to like break that loop of like drive, um and how like they freeze the forward movement of desire. um so like if comics are like the lesser satisfaction, like in reference to like movies, like it's strange to think about how like what would like a better satisfaction to be to them in reference to like this comic specifically. Like if a fetishist like looks at this and like lingers and like allows them to like depict and like internalize this violence as like something sexy, but if this is the lesser satisfaction, like what's the higher one? Unanswered question. It's a scary one to think about too, but the lesser satisfaction is dependable and it works, and again it's antisocial, private enjoyment, all of those things. And maybe this is why we're okay with fetishes, because like in a way it's the lesser of two evils. Because would we be more okay with someone getting off on images of violence rather than violence itself? Probably. So maybe that's why we kind of are like, if you keep it private and to yourself, then it's fine.
True. I don't even have anything to say, like, but yeah.
Always the ending to our videos.
I know we're always like so
Leaving
many
us
unanswered
pondering.
questions. I guess we'll never know. But that's a good point right there.
Ironically,
Yeah.
Dark ponder.
ironically, ponder it.
Yeah.
Ironically, the last thing I have written in my notes is, even though an extreme minority of us are full-blown sexual fetishists, we are all on some level representational fetishists. We engage with fetishism on a daily basis. So much of like so many things that we discussed throughout the beautiful course of these videos, which I think we're all sad to see end. Where am I going with this?
Trying to wrap it up in a cute way.
I remember. Okay. Much like a lot of the theories and just ideas we've talked about, we are not immune to any of it. We're not immune to fetishism. At some level, we're all subject to representational fetishism. Take that as you will. I'm not going to sit here and be like, okay, last thing we'll do, everyone say what your fetish is representationally. Yeah.
Apparently mine has my squishmallows, so
Squishmallows and cute things.
Oh my goodness.
me and all my best friends. And I'm not ashamed.
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed of my fetish
You
because
shouldn't
it's
be.
private. Me and oh my
That's
god.
on video though.
Well,
We're gonna publish it on YouTube.
not the world seeing my bedroom. Don't look. I sometimes forget that like any old person can just like and
I
watch us
know.
speak. Freaky. And yeah, so and isn't fetishism all about the friends we made along the way? Right?
Fetishism is about the friends we made along the way.
Wait, Rachel, take your hand and do this, and then go like right here, and it'll look like we're making a heart, you and I.
You did it work?
Yes. Thanks for watching.
You guys are like
it's been an
Okay.
honor to create these videos for
been
our loving
awesome.
audience.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you
so much for
Manon.
watching. Yes. Shout out Manon.
Manon.
Yay. We hope you've enjoyed.
Like,
Okay.
Like and subscribe.
Oh yeah, like and
Smash the
comment.
button.
Comment who your favorite
comment
dirty
down
bird
below what
is.
your fetish is.
True. Let's start a little chat in the comments down below.
Comment
about
your
us.
fetish, or if you're a Disney adult. We've theorized that he's a
right.
Disney adult,
Yes.
but we'll leave that
Oh,
to
yes.
him.
Tweet about this video, post about it on Instagram, let all your friends know. On that note, we're dragging out this ending so much.
Yeah.
On that note, it's been real. Yay, MCA. Okay.
Yeah.
Signing off.
The dirty
Goodbye.
birds.
Bye.